Ambassador Franklin Morgan stared at his reflection in the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle, noting with mild disappointment that the bags under his eyes had developed bags of their own. 4 years as Earth's primary interstellar diplomat had aged him a decade, minimum. The job description hadn't mentioned the part about 18-hour workdays and dealing with species whose definition of casual conversation included discussing the mathematical probability of your evolutionary path being a cosmic mistake. "Ambassador, your tie is crooked N," said his assistant, Thomas, reaching over to adjust it. "The Regelians will interpret that as a sign of internal organ distress." Morgan sighed. "Maybe that's not far off. Any updates on the Zeltarian delegation?" Thomas scrolled through his datapad, still insisting on the largest suite on Centauri Prime Station. "They've also requested special atmospheric conditions that the station engineers say will make everyone else's eyes water. Standard Zeltarian behavior, sir." "Wonderful," Morgan muttered. "Earth's first major galactic summit, and we're sharing oxygen with the space equivalent of that guy who wears too much cologne in an elevator." General Hayes, the military liaison, snorted from across the cabin. "Just remember the briefing, sir. The Zeltarians are technologically advanced but diplomatically backward. Their culture values displays of superiority. Don't take the bait." Morgan nodded absently, his attention captured by the approaching station. Centauri Prime gleamed like a massive silver spider in space, its 8 arms extending from a central hub that pulsed with artificial light. Each arm housed different atmospheric conditions, gravity settings, and accommodations for the 37 species attending the summit. "Welcome to intergalactic politics," Morgan said to no one in particular, "where everyone's judging your species based on how shiny your ships are." The shuttle docked with a gentle thud. As the airlock cycled, Ambassador Morgan took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. This summit would establish humanity's place in the galactic community. After centuries of theoretical discussions about first contact, humans had finally made it to the galactic stage. 4 years of preparatory negotiations had led to this moment. "Remember," General Hayes whispered as the doors began to open, "we've kept most of our capabilities classified, as discussed. Let them underestimate us." Morgan nodded slightly as they stepped into the reception area. The cacophony of alien languages, translated through their earpieces, filled the air. Creatures of all descriptions moved around the vast hall, some floating, others crawling, many walking on varying numbers of appendages. And then Morgan saw them, the Zeltarians. Even without identification, they would have been unmistakable. 7-foot-tall humanoids with iridescent green skin and elaborate cranial ridges that seemed to be adorned with what could only be described as organic jewelry. They moved with deliberate grace of beings who expected others to step aside. "Well," Morgan muttered under his breath as Ambassador Krill X of the Zeltarians swept past a group of smaller aliens without acknowledgement, "this is going to be fun." The Grand Assembly Hall of Centauri Prime Station had been designed with acoustics that would accommodate everything from subsonic Jovian whale songs to the ultrasonic whistles of the Proxima avians. Its curved ceiling was embedded with lights that simulated a neutral star field, and the massive circular stage in the center was surrounded by tiered seating for the delegates. Morgan took his assigned seat in the Earth section, flanked by General Hayes and Thomas. Across the hall, Ambassador Krill X and the Zeltarian delegation were making what could only be described as a theatrical entrance, their ceremonial attire catching the light in ways that seemed specifically designed to draw attention. "Someone should tell them that in human culture, showing up last to a party is considered rude, not impressive," Thomas whispered. The Galactic Council Elder, an ancient Taurian with skin like weathered leather, rose from their seat. Their translator emitted a gentle chime before broadcasting their voice. "We welcome all sentient species to this historic Galactic Cooperation Summit. As is tradition, each new participating member will be formally recognized with an assessment from an established council member. The Zeltarian Collective has volunteered to perform the assessment of Earth." Morgan felt a small knot form in his stomach. The assessment was supposed to be a formality, a welcome speech with perhaps some gentle guidance for the newcomers. But the Zeltarians had specifically requested to assess Earth, which seemed suspicious. Ambassador Krill X glided to the center stage. the lights reflecting off their cranial ridges in dazzling patterns. Their mouth, a thin line barely visible beneath three breathing orifices, curved into what Morgan recognized as the Zeltarian version of a condescending smile. "Honored delegates," Krill X began, voice melodious despite the translator's mechanical tone. "Today we welcome the youngest sapients to join our council. The species known as humans, from the planet they call Earth." A polite murmur rippled through the assembly. "We have studied their civilization with great interest," Krill X continued. "They have progressed from simple tool use to basic spaceflight in what is, by galactic standards, an impressive if erratic timeline. However, their technological development remains charmingly primitive." Morgan felt General Hayes stiffen beside him. "Their understanding of quantum mechanics is elementary at best. Their energy production still relies heavily on fusion, a technology most council species mastered millennia ago. Their medical science continues to struggle with diseases that the rest of us eliminated from our populations before. Developing interstellar travel." The knot in Morgan's stomach tightened. This wasn't an assessment, it was a public humiliation. "Perhaps most concerning," Krill X said, voice dripping with false concern, "is their history of internal conflict. These barely evolved primates spent most of their recorded history fighting amongst themselves over resources, ideology, and territory. One might question whether such a species is truly ready for the responsibilities of council membership." The hall had grown uncomfortably quiet. Other delegates were shifting in their seats, some looking embarrassed on behalf of Earth, others nodding in apparent agreement. Nevertheless, Krill X concluded with magnificent insincerity, "We welcome them to observe and learn from their betters. Perhaps in another century or two, they might contribute meaningfully to our discussions. Until then, we offer our guidance." With a flourish that sent their ceremonial robes fluttering, Krill X returned to their seat, satisfied smirk firmly in place. All eyes turned to the Earth delegation. Protocol dictated that Ambassador Morgan should respond with thanks for the assessment and a brief statement of Earth's commitment to galactic cooperation. Instead, Franklin Morgan simply stared at Krill X, expression utterly neutral, and said nothing at all. The silence stretched from uncomfortable to excruciating. The silence continued for precisely 43 seconds. Morgan had counted before the Galactic Council elder cleared their throat, a sound like gravel in a blender. "Does the Earth representative wish to respond to the assessment?" they prompted. Morgan smiled politely, inclined his head in acknowledgement, and remained conspicuously silent. Whispers erupted across the assembly hall. The Arcturus delegates were frantically consulting their cultural databases. The Proxima avian's feathers were rippling in patterns that indicated confusion. Even the normally impassive Andromedan collective seemed unsettled, their shared consciousness creating subtle ripples in the electromagnetic field around their delegation. Ambassador Krill X's cranial ridges flushed a deeper green. "Perhaps the human delegate requires translation assistance," they suggested, the mockery in their voice thinly veiled. Morgan simply maintained eye contact and his pleasant smile. General Hayes, following Morgan's lead, sat equally still and silent beside him. Thomas, initially confused, quickly caught on and adopted the same eerily calm demeanor. "Most unusual," murmured a multi-limbed delegate from Sirius Prime to their neighbor. "Is this some sort of human ritual?" "Maybe they're communicating telepathically," suggested another, this one a gelatinous being contained in a hovering environmental suit. Morgan was, in fact, thinking very specific thoughts, though not telepathically. He was thinking about Earth's classified military capabilities, about the quantum-shielded fleet currently stationed in the shadow of Saturn, and about the dimensional phasing technology that Earth scientists had reverse-engineered from a crashed scout ship decades ago, technology that the galactic community believed was still centuries beyond human understanding. He thought about the network of deep space sensors that had been monitoring galactic communications for nearly a century before official first contact, about how much Earth actually knew about the political dynamics of the Council, about the carefully maintained facade of wide-eyed cosmic newcomers that had served Earth so well during initial negotiations. And he thought, with considerable satisfaction, about the expression that would cross Ambassador Krillex's face when they realized just how catastrophically they had miscalculated. But externally, Morgan simply sat in polite silence, occasionally taking a sip of water. The council elder, increasingly uncomfortable, moved to continue the ceremony. Perhaps we should proceed with the formal introductions of all delegations. As the proceedings awkwardly continued, Commander Olivia Reyes, officially listed as a cultural attaché, but actually Earth's top military intelligence officer, quietly excused herself from the Earth delegation's seating area. In the corridor outside, she activated her secure communicator, well out of range of any surveillance systems. "This is Reyes. Initiate protocol silent response. Authorization code Delta 9 Tango Whiskey 47. The voice that responded was synthetic, designed to mask the identity of the speaker. The protocol's silent response acknowledged. Timeline. Arrow. Reyes glanced back toward the assembly hall, where Morgan was maintaining his diplomatic silence with the patience of a statue. Begin fleet movement immediately. Arrival window, 48 hours, and send the message to all Earth embassies. Code Mongoose. Understood. Code Mongoose activated. Reyes smiled tightly, slipped the communicator back into her pocket, and returned to the assembly hall with the serene expression of someone who hadn't just activated Earth's most significant military mobilization in history. The other delegates were still whispering about the strange human reaction, unaware that silence could be the most threatening response of all. By the second day of the summit, the Earth delegation's behavior had evolved from unusual to unnerving. They attended every session, took detailed notes, and participated in procedural votes, but otherwise maintained their policy of minimal verbal engagement. When directly addressed, Ambassador Morgan would respond with the fewest possible words, always polite but never expanding beyond absolute necessity. General Hayes maintained a constant, evaluating gaze that made several delegates visibly uncomfortable. Thomas seemed to be the only one conducting something resembling normal interaction, but even he had adopted an air of restrained politeness that was markedly different from his previous friendly demeanor. The Zeltarian delegation appeared increasingly agitated by this approach, with Ambassador Krillex making several pointed remarks about primitive species lacking basic diplomatic capabilities. Each barb was met with the same pleasant smile and silence from Morgan, which only seemed to further irritate the Zeltarian. During a recess in the trade negotiation session, diplomat Thrix of the Arcturian Confederation approached the Zeltarian table. Thrix, a diminutive being with 4 arms and skin that changed color with their emotions, currently a concerned purple, it was known for their diplomatic skill and extensive knowledge of emerging species. Ambassador Krillex, Thrix began, their translator rendering their clicks and whistles into standard galactic language. "I believe you may have made a significant cultural miscalculation regarding the humans." Krillex's cranial ridges rippled dismissively. "Their reaction only confirms my assessment. They lack the sophistication to engage in proper diplomatic discourse." Thrix's skin flickered briefly to warning orange. "I'd been studying Earth's historical archives. Their species has a saying, 'Beware the fury of a patient man.' Their silence is not submission or confusion, it's deliberation." "Deliberation?" Krillex scoffed. "About what? How to operate technologies they barely understand." "That," Thrix said carefully, "is the precise misunderstanding I'm concerned about. My research suggests that humans are quite adept at concealing their true capabilities. Throughout their history, they've employed strategies of purposeful underestimation. Are you suggesting these primitives are engaged in some form of deception?" Krillex's voice carried a note of genuine surprise. "I'm suggesting," Thrix replied, skin now a deep cautionary red, "that there might be more to their silence than you realize. And that, historically, when humans go quiet after an insult, it rarely ends well for the insulting party." Across the chamber, similar conversations were occurring. The Betelgeuse ambassador was recounting to a group of fascinated delegates how their species had once encountered a small human mining operation near their territory. "We initially dismissed them as inconsequential," the ambassador rumbled, "until one of our patrol ships violated their claimed space. They issued a single warning, which our captain ignored. The human vessel which our sensors had classified as a simple mining barge suddenly deployed weapon systems that our technology couldn't even identify. They disabled our military vessel without causing a single casualty. Then they towed our ship back to our border and left without further comment. We've treated human claims with extreme caution ever since. A delegate from Tau Ceti added, "Our anthropologists have studied their entertainment media extensively. Humans seem to have a cultural fascination with the concept of hidden strength and unexpected resistance. Their fiction frequently features scenarios where a seemingly weaker party reveals concealed power at a critical moment. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, communication officers on various homeworlds were receiving unexpected messages from Earth embassies. The messages were cordial, brief, and identical, a formal notification that a routine naval exercise would be conducted in neutral space near Centauri Prime within the next 24 hours, with apologies for any inconvenience this might cause. These messages were met with confusion by most recipients. Earth had never previously announced any military exercises, and most species weren't aware that humans possessed significant space naval capabilities at all. Back at the summit, Commander Reyes received a single word message on her secure communicator, deployed. She caught Morgan's eye across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod. The ambassador's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted subtly. The waiting was almost over. On the third day of the summit, during a particularly tedious discussion about interstellar trade route regulations, the station's proximity alarms activated with a series of escalating tones. The council elder paused mid-sentence. Control center report. The station's security chief, a Regalian with exoskeletal features that made them appear perpetually alarmed, responded through the chamber's communication system. Multiple vessels have just appeared in local space. Elder, they weren't detected by our long-range scanners. They simply materialized. A murmur of concern spread through the delegates. Most spacefaring civilizations knew that ships needed to decelerate when approaching populated areas, and realizing suggested capabilities beyond conventional drive systems. Identification, the elder prompted. The vessels are broadcasting Earth registry codes, the security chief replied, their voice carrying a note of disbelief. It appears to be a human fleet. All eyes turned to the Earth delegation. For the first time in 3 days, Ambassador Morgan rose to speak, his expression one of mild surprise, as though he'd just remembered something moderately interesting. "Ah, yes," he said, voice casual. "That would be the 7th Fleet arriving for their scheduled diplomatic visit. I do apologize, I should have mentioned it earlier." The chamber's main display activated, showing the space surrounding Centauri Prime. Delegates gasped or made species-equivalent expressions of shock. Against the darkness of space hung not a small diplomatic contingent, but a massive armada. The ships were unlike any human vessels previously seen by the galactic community, sleek, dark, and bearing design elements that appeared centuries beyond what Earth was thought capable of producing. At the center of the formation was a vessel so large it dwarfed the station itself. Its hull was marked with the Earth emblem and a designation in human script, Ed's silent reminder. Ambassador Krill X had risen from their seat, cranial ridges pale with what those familiar with Zeltarian physiology recognized as extreme alarm. "This is a violation of council space. They sputtered. "Warships are prohibited without prior authorization." Morgan tilted his head slightly. "Warships? I don't recall mentioning warships. Ambassador, these are research and diplomatic vessels. Those are clearly military configurations," Krill X insisted. "By whose assessment?" Morgan replied mildly. "You've already established that humans are, what was it, charmingly primitive in our understanding of technology. Perhaps you're simply misinterpreting our design aesthetics." The security chief's voice interrupted again. "The human fleet is requesting docking permissions for a shuttle. They're inviting all delegates to tour their flagship as a gesture of goodwill." Morgan smiled, the first genuine smile he'd shown since the summit began. "Excellent. I'd be happy to personally escort Ambassador Krill X on the tour." I think they'll find our elementary understanding of quantum mechanics particularly interesting. General Hayes finally broke her silence as well. We can show them our medical bay too. I'm sure they'd be fascinated by how we've struggled with those diseases they mentioned. The chamber had gone deathly quiet. On the display, one of the smaller Earth vessels performed a maneuver that should have been physically impossible, according to publicly known propulsion technology, essentially teleporting from one position to another without any visible transition. Just a little something we developed last year, Morgan commented casually, as though discussing a minor software update. Our engineers call it dimensional phasing. I'm told it's quite rudimentary compared to what we have in development. Ambassador Krill remained standing, but appeared to be having difficulty maintaining their composure. This is deliberate deception. You've hidden your true capabilities from the Council. Morgan's expression hardened just slightly. No, Ambassador. We simply chose not to broadcast them. There's a difference, one that any species with a sophisticated understanding of diplomacy would recognize. The shuttle bay of the EDS silent reminder was cavernous and immaculate. As the delegation shuttle docked, Ambassador Krill sat rigid with tension, their normally vibrant cranial ridges now a sickly pale green. Morgan gestured casually as they disembarked. Welcome aboard. We're rather proud of this vessel, first of her class, though we have 11 more under construction back home. The visiting delegates' representatives from all 37 species had eagerly accepted the invitation, gazed around in poorly concealed amazement. The technology on display was clearly generations beyond what Earth had previously revealed. This ship operates primarily on zero-point energy, explained Commander Reyes, who had taken on the role of tour guide. The quantum fluctuation harvesters are capable of extracting essentially unlimited power from vacuum space. We developed the technology about 70 years ago, but kept it classified until recently. 70 years? Sputtered a Betelgeusian delegate. That predates your official first contact by decades. Does it? Morgan replied innocently. I suppose it does. Interesting coincidence. As they passed through a corridor lined with what appeared to be gravity manipulation controls, Krill finally found their voice. Why the deception? Why pretend to be less advanced than you are? Morgan stopped walking and turned to face the Zeltarian directly. Ambassador, let me share a brief lesson in human history. When Europeans first encountered the Japanese in the 16th century, they brought firearms weapons the Japanese had never seen. Within 50 years, Japanese gunsmiths were producing firearms that outperformed anything from Europe. He continued walking, leading the group into what appeared to be a weapons control center. Holographic displays showed defensive systems beyond anything the delegates recognized. When humans encounter new technology, we don't just adopt it, we obsessively improve it. But we've learned that sometimes it's advantageous to let others underestimate you while you quietly build your capabilities. We call it strategic humility. The tour continued through engineering sections, scientific laboratories, and defensive systems, each reveal more impressive than the last. The Earth delegation seemed to take particular pleasure in explaining technologies that directly contradicted Krill's dismissive assessment. Finally, they arrived at the ship's diplomatic quarters, a chamber designed to accommodate representatives from all known species in comfort. At the center stood a large table with the Earth symbol inlaid in its surface. This seems an appropriate place to discuss the revised trade agreements, Morgan suggested. Given the new understanding of Earth's contributions to the galactic community. Krill's cranial ridges had gone from pale green to a mortified blue, a color humans had never seen on a Zeltarian before. Ambassador Morgan, they began, voice uncharacteristically subdued. It appears the Zeltarian collective made significant errors in our assessment of human capabilities. This was regrettable. Oh, Morgan raised an eyebrow. I thought we were barely evolved primates playing with fusion. Krill flinched. A diplomatic misstep of the highest order. I offer my personal apology and the apology of the collective. Morgan maintained his silence for just long enough to make Krill squirm before answering. Apology accepted, Ambassador. We humans have a saying, actions speak louder than words. Your cooperation in the upcoming negotiations will demonstrate the sincerity of your apology. The council elder, who had observed everything with increasing astonishment, finally spoke. I believe we have all learned a valuable lesson about hasty judgments today. Earth clearly belongs at the council table as a full and equal member. Oh, I wouldn't say equal, Morgan replied casually. Every species has different strengths to offer. The Arcturians excel at theoretical mathematics. The Rigelians are unparalleled geological engineers. The Zeltarians, he paused, glancing at Krill X, have truly impressive cranial ridges. Several delegates failed to suppress their species' equivalent of laughter. As the impromptu diplomatic session concluded, and the revised treaties were signed with terms significantly more favorable to Earth than originally proposed, Morgan pulled General Hayes aside. Remind me to thank the diplomatic corps for suggesting the silent treatment, he murmured. It worked better than I expected. Hayes grinned. Silence, followed by overwhelming firepower, the oldest diplomatic strategy in human history. Not firepower, Morgan corrected. Just the suggestion of it. We haven't fired a single weapon. The best kind of force is the kind you never have to use, Hayes agreed. Just letting them know it exists is usually enough. As they prepared to return to the station, Morgan approached Krill X one final time. Ambassador, one piece of advice from US barely evolved primates. Next time you meet a new species, perhaps consider that their silence doesn't indicate inability to speak, but rather that they're choosing what not to say. Krill X's cranial ridges flushed with embarrassment, but they nodded in acknowledgement. A lesson the Zeltarian collective will not soon forget. Ambassador Morgan, though I confess I still don't understand why you didn't immediately correct my assessment. Morgan smiled enigmatically. Another human saying, Ambassador, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. As the Earth delegation departed, leaving behind a thoroughly impressed and slightly terrified galactic community, Morgan couldn't help but feel satisfied. Earth had gone from being dismissed as an insignificant newcomer to being recognized as a major power in the span of 3 days, all without firing a shot or making a single threat. Sometimes, he reflected, the best response really was no response at all.